Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Neve, and just want to check that the attendees coming in are able to hear us. So if anybody can write in the chat box, yes or no, please do let us
Mm.
know, or reactions. Um, so yes, great. Okay, welcome everybody, and we have a diverse mix of participants and attendees. So do let us know in the chat box as well, where are you listening from? If it's very, very early in the US, or you are closer to us, closer to me in Europe, uh, in in Ireland, or in the US, or in the UK. Sorry. Dublin, Ireland, Ohio, Canada, Germany, South Carolina, Colorado. Okay, we have a lot of different time zones. So I will just start by welcoming everybody. I love Seattle. I hope it's not as rainy as it is in Ireland. Welcome to today, and today is going to be recorded, so I hope that is okay with everyone. It means that um, what we will do afterwards is send out a recording. If you want to look back, if you can stay for the whole time, uh, I will also put together notes from the transcription. And if you need captions, if you click the three buttons, I think in the top right hand corner, you have more, and you have the option for language and speech, and you can turn on the captions there. Unfortunately, I had hired a sign language interpreter for today, but she was unable to join us at the last moment. So my apologies there, and I hope the captions and the notes afterwards are good enough for you participating. So that's some housekeeping, and let me introduce you to and welcome our guests. Maybe you know them from the world of accessibility, you know them from LinkedIn. We have Larry Goldberg, the accessibility sensei. I think Larry has been over 30 years in accessibility and has a wealth of knowledge. And I think what you're going to learn from him is great. Sherry is a multi-award winning, accessibility advocate, engineer, has worked in so many organizations, is a committee member on a lot of important organizations as well. And we also have Matthew Johnson, who is the global program manager for diversity with ThoughtWorks. So all of these guests are going to give a little bit more information about themselves in a moment. Um, I'm Neve, founder at Leaders for Accessibility, and really we are bringing this network together for accessibility professionals, companies that want to know more about disability inclusion, and with this network, if you haven't checked out our website before, you can find specialists, you can find tools there to help you create more inclusive products and places of work. Myself, I am a white female from Ireland with brown hair, brown eyes. Today I'm wearing a grey cardigan because it's cold, and a purple shirt as well. So let me hand you over to Larry, who can tell us a little bit more about his life and experience in the world of accessibility.
Thank you, Nave, and thank you for inviting me with some of my good buddies here, and I'm sure online as well. My whole history in the field of accessibility started with closed captioning. I did not come from the disability side of the world and of that field of interest. I was a media guy, media and technology and computers, and freelance video, and was hoping to get a job at WGBH, Boston's public broadcaster, well known for their advanced introduction of technology for people with disabilities. And they were looking for someone who understood closed captioning, which in the early days, not many people knew about. So it was a pretty easy job application. Do you know what closed captioning is? Yes, you're hired. And from that point, everything just grew, and I learned from the communities we work with, and originally the deaf and hard of hearing community. We launched audio description for blind folks, so I got to know a lot about blindness, and eventually started an R&D group called the National Center for Accessible Media, which began looking at absolutely everything having to do with media, technology, and accessibility. Very interested in public policy, so got involved in writing some legislation in the United States, including a piece of law that many of you know about, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, also known as the CVAA in the United States. And having worked on that, was asked by the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, to help write the regs and head a committee. And then not long after that, Yahoo approached me and said, well, now you've done it. You've created a compliance need for us. Would you like to come on board to Yahoo's team? I did, and spent 8 years there, eventually becoming head of accessibility for Yahoo, at which point the world was my oyster. I got to meet everybody and this incredible community of people. And today I am spending my time, left Yahoo 2 years ago, spending my time with startups like Tigum, Neve's organization, and some others we'll talk about, all of them affected by AI. So it's a good time to talk about it.
Great. And Larry, if you wouldn't mind just describing yourself as well.
Sure enough, sure enough. And this is something we're learning from the blind community. Some enjoy that, some don't. So very briefly, white male with a white beard. I'm older than 60, we'll say.
Thanks, Larry. And Sherry?
Hey everybody, I'm Sherry Bernhaber. I am speaking with you today from California, although I will be in New Brunswick. Mark Frieden, I saw we have a participant here from New Brunswick, which is where my family's originally from, so I spend all my summers there. I am a white middle-aged female that wears bifocals. I use a wheelchair to get around. It's a congenital mobility disability that has not improved with age. But the reason why I got into accessibility wasn't because of that. It was because my daughter was deaf. And I was tired of seeing her getting discriminated against in school settings and against health insurance. So, in terms of my educational background, I started off in computer science, and then about 10 years after that, went to law school. So, it's kind of the perfect storm of a background for being in accessibility because it's like, okay, I know how to code it, I know why it has to be coded from the legal side, and then I've got the empathy and passion and advocacy from being a person with lived experience of disability. So I did start the accessibility program at McDonald's. The accessibility features of the kiosks, I actually was very heavily responsible for. Don't know if people do as much drive-through outside of the US, but drive-through, the new drive-through screens, I did those a few years back as well. Went to VMware, did a lot of accessibility stuff for the cloud, and got to do some really cool generative AI things, which was just starting to take off when VMware got acquired by Broadcom. So that's kind of my background, and really happy to be here to talk to you guys about what I did with respect to generative AI. And some of the things that I find that it works well with accessibility and other things not so much.
Yes, and I like, not only is your experience amazing and the knowledge and you have in the different areas as well, but one thing I just wanted to point out is that you also view AI and accessibility going together just as well as peanut butter and dark chocolate. So I just wanted to share that is Sherry's view on what we're going to be talking about today. So I think many people might share those sentiments. And we'll come to Matthew.
Hello, everybody. I'm from London, a very small town in the UK. It usually rains, but at the moment it's not raining, so that's very good. I have brown hair and I wear a dark blue shirt, and I have a blur background. I am profoundly deaf, born deaf, and I wear a cochlear implant, which is like a hearing aid, but it's more digital. You put a wire inside my ear, and the wire go into the cochlea, which is the hearing organ, and they emit frequency, trying to mimic like Huey hair cell. It's really good because it actually improved my listening by 50%, which is fantastic. So my background, I work in tech for the last 35 years. I was a programmer and then been around in technical. In the last few years, I become the global role in disability inclusion. I have two hats. One is trying to make ThoughtWork, which is my company I work for. It's a technology consulting company, and we work with our client. So I have two hats. One is to make ThoughtWork a thriving place for people with disability. And I have another hat is to encourage our people to work with our client to talk about accessibility, how to make their product and service inclusive. And I work over 19 countries and I'm learning so much. I don't know it all, but I'm learning so much. It's great. Very inspiring to hear what other countries are doing. So I just want to give you a little bit about my definite. So when I was a boy, I used to wear body aids. We were probably about slightly bigger than the cigarette packet, because the battery were very big, and I had thick wire sticking out into my ears. And of course, the tech had improved the evolution of it, and then the battery became smaller. So I had what we call ear level with the hearing aid behind the ear. It became smaller. It became more powerful and more clarity and so on. And now I have the cochlear implant, which I described it earlier. I've just had a new processor which sits outside my ear just before Christmas, and it's now AI enabled. And what it does, it adjusts to the sound that I am in, whether I'm cycling or walking in the trees, shopping, or in a very noisy environment, like in a restaurant or in a cafe, or just talking about, and it adjusts it. It's not perfect, but it's getting better. So my passion is now we're talking about accessibility because it does improve the life for people with disability and make them more independent and actually provide employment. And that's why I'm so passionate on around accessibility and AI. It's not perfect, but it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think even to hear those things of how it's affecting, real tangible outcomes, how it's affecting your life. I think this conversation for the next 45 minutes is going to be really interesting. And just to say for the participants, what we'll cover is talking about new advances, what it means, what AI means in assistive technology, how people's lives are being impacted in a small way. You've heard Matthew's already. We also want to look at some of the dangers and maybe the potential drawbacks, and what the future looks like. How exciting and interesting is that? And just so to be aware, within the Leaders for Accessibility Network on our webpage, leadersforaccessibility.com, and I'll share the link. You're able to inquire about getting more time and more consultation, training, workshops from our specialists and other specialists in different ways of accessibility. So, anything you hear today, there's people out there that can bring a lot more to your teams and to your organizations as well. So you can find them on leadersforaccessibility.com. So one thing I want to start by asking both our panelists and also the attendees can answer this. And I'll just come to Tim. Is the call is being recorded? Yeah, just some questions there. The call is being recorded. If you are hearing, if you want to use the closed captions, the 3 dots for more, language and speech, the closed captions there work faster, I think, than the other ones. And also, if you have a problem with the sound, it might be on your end. I think the other participants can hear okay. So my first question, and you can put it into the chat as well. I'm really interested to know what people feel about the recent advances in AI and accessibility in one word. How does it make you feel? Larry, we'll go to you. How would you describe your sense of emotion with AI and accessibility?
Well, when you prepped us with that question, Dave, I talked to my son about it, who's very interested in this area, and he suggested the word ambivalent, and I think it says it all. There are some great existing and potential applications that could and already have made such wonderful improvements, interesting ones. But there are definitely some hazards. And even today, I was involved in what might be one of the earlier mainstream applications of AI at the time, automatic speech recognition for captions. And today we're looking at exactly one of those applications in this webinar. But it came out well before 10 years ago and wasn't so great then. And in fact, isn't always so great today. Um, if you are watching the captions, sometimes I'm amused and sometimes I'm disgruntled by some of the translations that come up. After so long, it still stumbles on accents and noisy environments, vocabulary. It turns out Matthew has a cocky plant, as the caption said, and it could be amusing for some, but if you were using it in a appointment with your doctor, it's a little bit more serious if it doesn't get it right. So my ambivalence is really about some of the applications coming to market before they're really ready. And some of them are recreational or for editing a document. They might not be life or death, but some of the other ones could have serious harm. And I think we need to attend to that very closely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Matthew, for you, the same question?
I mean, obviously, Larry and I share the same experience with the caption. There's the pros and cons about the automated caption, which is AI enabled. But I have a Google phone. By the way, I'm not telling. I got no connection with Google. But 3 years ago, the Google phone Pixel had enabled me to translate speech to text so that I could follow computation real time. And it's a game changer for me. Instead of relying on everybody to use the phone, can you make a call for me because I can't hit the telephone, or send them an email and wait for days for them to reply. I can use the phone like everybody else. That's what it's about. And I use the phone nearly every day now. It's a game changer and also a personal changer because I met my partner who lived remotely, and we kept in touch during the lockdown, during the COVID, the pandemic. So it's also a personal changer for me. But so yet, like Larry said about the captures, it's not always perfect, and it depends on the environment, the situation you are in. I find it very frustrating when the captures are not that accurate. If it's less than 95% accurate, it's not a nice experience at all. I have to process my mind, work it out, what he's trying to say, the nuances, try and fill up the gap and everything. And for example, if you're watching a comedy or a comedian or something in real time, it's always impossible because I laugh maybe 5 seconds later when I'm trying to work it out what you're trying to say as a joke. So there's still a lot to go. However, the last 3 years, the AI caption had improved dramatically. And it's not just the caption, but all the other tools like TAI, the Microsoft tool, which identify objects real time. Then you've got prosthetic limbs, which is our AI enabled. So it's just for the individual. So if someone had a meaty arm or a hand, they have the prosthetic limb, which is AI enabled, and it memorizes the movement, the nerve ending, and so on. There are so many AI out there. I think the key that we need to be aware of is not 100% accurate. So we need to use a judgment. We need to take with a pinch of salt. We need to think about what are the limitations it does and so on. And that's what we need to be aware of. I mean, there are so many that I could go on, but I will stop here for the moment. I'm sure there'll be more questions after that. But I give Sherry a chance to say something.
Of course, and just to echo some of the feelings, sentiments coming from the participants, is we do have optimism, we do have cautious optimism, we do have trepidation, worry, so there is maybe a continuum of emotions and feelings, in this group anyway today. And I think Sherry's already made her feelings clear, that it's like peanut butter and dark chocolate. So I imagine, Sherry, you're on the more optimistic side of AI and its potential in accessibility.
Well, yes and no. Larry Stoll, ambivalent, cautiously optimistic if I got 2 words, but since you're limiting me to 1, I'm going to say it's evolutionary. And some evolution is good and some evolution is bad. Evolutionary just means it's a big shift, or in ways of doing things that we weren't doing them before. Like Larry, I am super concerned about people rushing things out before they're ready. We've seen AIs have to be recalled. We've seen massive ethical problems. For the first bit, when you were using DALL-E to generate images, if you asked it for a picture of somebody with autism, you always got a sad white child. And obviously sad white children are not the core of what autism represents. So I'm famous for saying that technology always evolves faster than the ethical use of the technology. As a former intellectual property attorney, ChatGPT is facing numerous lawsuits. You can go into ChatGPT right now and ask it to write something in my voice, because I had enough blogs out there before the ChatGPT database cut off, which I think was September a year ago, and it actually sounds like me. So, people could go out there and imitate me. How do I feel about that? Not awesome. I spent a lot of time and energy developing that voice. On the other side, you can also go to ChatGPT and say, write me an outline for an accessibility testing plan for a shopping cart. And it will give you a 10-page test plan that's actually pretty damn good. So, yeah, I think it's, I'm worried about the ethics. I'm worried about the bias because the larger GPTs are just pulling from the general internet, and we know the internet is biased, which means the large language models are going to inherit that bias. We can't clean up the internet, right? That's not going to happen. So we need to find ways to be able to fine tune these large language models and say, no, look, we know you got that information from the internet, but it's biased. Here is data that you should be using instead.
Yeah, and I think that some people mentioned in there when you were talking about captioning that it doesn't recognize women's voices. Maybe the data wasn't trained on women's voices. You've mentioned the image about an autistic child. And we're seeing a lot of those things, especially at the beginning with DALL-E, the very stereotypical and biased images. And one thing that I see, and don't know if you agree with this, is that we are overemphasizing or putting so much trust in quantity rather than quality. For example, so like write this code for me, write this book for me, do something for me. And when we see the quantity and the speed that it can create things at, we sometimes confuse that with quality as well. And there's I'm sure we have a lot of people working in accessibility here and accessibility managers. And what's the danger in over trusting the AI, over trusting what can be done for us rather than fine tuning it, or having our own kind of process of critical thinking before we embed these things into the technology. So, Larry, I see you nodding. You have a thought on that?
Yeah, the hype right now is being driven by such things as stock valuation. And, did Apple go up when they announced Apple Intelligence without even knowing how good it is yet? Because the beta's not even out until the fall. So the effects are very much about the marketplace, and how companies can show up to the table. But there's a lot more concerns that it's hard to slow down that aspect of the business side. But when coming out of Silicon Valley, the mindset is move fast and break things. The first thing I think about is, what if those things are people with disabilities? What if those things are the technologies that people with disabilities rely on? It's hard for me to imagine that any of those infamous situations of AI breaking couldn't have been dealt with in advance by red teams who poke at every possible flaw. And the ones that we've seen come out, well, they feel obvious to me, and I'm not an AI coder or expert. But the notion of, the latest one of put glue on your pizza to hold the cheese down, or give me a picture of the popes and half of them are people of color, which they weren't. And these seem like the kind of tests that could have been done, and particularly for the kinds of technologies that people with disabilities use, there's some additional tests and concepts that really need to be worked on in advance. Now, I will go to the other side of my ambivalence. I'm blown away by Be My AI, which someone in the chat mentioned. It's awesome what they've put out there. Uh, Initially using human volunteers for Be My Eyes, but Be My AI does some pretty amazing stuff and can be extremely helpful. So it's not like we should put the brakes on everything, but I think we could do a much better job vetting the quality before launch.
Yeah,
So I
definitely.
harped a bit on the data being a source of bias, but you're 100% correct, Larry, that the programmers can be a source of bias also. And when you look at the fact that most programmers don't have disabilities, and when they do have disabilities, it's very overweighted in neurodiversity, which is great, but it's very underweighted in things like sight loss, hearing loss, and mobility impairments. So I'm going to tell you a famous story without naming any corporate names. But about 5 years ago, when self-driving cars were first starting to be put into testing, there was a test environment where the software told the person who was testing the software that it was okay to hit a person in a wheelchair because it thought it was a shopping cart. It identified the object as a shopping cart and not a person in a wheelchair. And when the debugging was done to figure out, well, why did it think that that person was in a shopping cart, and not a person in a wheelchair? The answer was that the AI had been programmed that wheelchairs only go forward. And the person in the wheelchair was going backwards, therefore it must be a shopping cart. So, that's a problem. That can result in somebody dying. And so, they're like Larry, I've got, massive concerns about ethics, about data bias, and about intellectual property. I would say those three things are my top concerns. And then obviously there are stories about, there's another famous story in the US recently where a lawyer just cranked out a legal brief on ChatGPT and mailed it off to the judge. And it contained cases that were made up. So AIs do hallucinate. And I don't know how long it's going to take to eliminate that, because the AIs don't like to say, I don't know the answer. They will guess. And when they can't even guess, then they just make stuff up. So that shopping cart example that I gave you in my introduction, it would be about 90% there, I would say. I would never, ever, ever today do anything with AI without human supervision. You can't just take it and ship it off. Because there's going to be mistakes, especially around context. Context is the one thing that AI doesn't do well yet, and I think it's going to be quite a few years before we get there, where it really understands the context behind what it's saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matthew, do you have?
Yeah. So I totally agree what Sherry and Larry are saying. I think the key is education. It's about, I mean, I'm generally a big fan of AI, mainly because it gives people with disability their independence, you know, and do things that, you know, like everybody else does, give him a job and so on. But we can't rely on AI 100%. We shouldn't. Tech and AI, I mean, AI is the piece of technology, really. AI and tech actually, we should use them to assist what we do, but not substitute. So that's something we need to bear that in mind. But going back to the data, obviously it's not perfect. And I was looking at the chat group, someone mentioned about it's not just people with disability, but also like LGBTQ, the color and the gender. So there are data is not perfect, but I think it had improved and people are being aware, trying to make it more inclusive. And that's where we need to focus mainly. Because we get 100% perfect data, there's no such thing perfection. But if we get it better, then it will eliminate those bias. So that's why I believe education is one thing that we need to think about, educating people who work on AI and tech, and make sure that all different type of group, ethnic group, everybody else should be considered in the data. Secondly, one thing I've always tell people, my workforce, to tell the client, always try and focus on people who need it most. Focus on the people, especially people with disability, and everybody else benefit. So, for example, caption, focus on people for the deaf and the hard of hearing, but lots of other people use it for lots of reasons. Maybe their first language, not that language. They're in a very noisy environment or very strong accent. Similarly, for you know, I mean, I have a beautiful story of the typewriter. It's 250 years old. I always tell a lot of people that story. But about 250 years ago, the typewriter was developed because an Italian had a mistress, very naughty. That's not what I approve, but I love the story because it's very romantic. The mistress was blind and she wanted to write love letters. So he came up with a typewriter so that she could write love letters, which I think is a wonderful story. But of course, typewriter, everybody had a keyboard now. And now we have a software keyboard, which is AI enabled, to memorize your movement. So the more of a story, focus on people who need it most, and everybody else benefits.
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead, Larry.
I wanted to mention a notion that feeds into what both Matthew and Sherry is talking about, and the idea of what data are you feeding these engines. I want to quote a woman, a professor from Ontario College of Art and Design. I hesitate to say her name because captions always get it wrong in very amusing ways, but her name is Jutta Treviranus. And yep, there it is. That's what it comes out as. So Jutta is brilliant.
Larry, have you seen the caption?
I am watching the captions, and it always comes out that way. And I'm sure Jutta has seen it that way as well. She talks about the human starburst. When we have this massive amount of compute Of course, the great massive volumes are in the center of typical functionality, but the human starburst means that out on the edges, there are all kinds of diverse people, and they also should be sampled for their voice, their images, their behavior, how they write, and that would really improve how AI behaves. And you can look up her paper on this human starburst. It's outside of that bell curve when you can design for the people who aren't quote unquote typical, that's going to help improve the output so you don't make these egregious errors when you're trying to create images or text or anything generative.
But that might fly in the face of what all scientists are kind of taught at the beginning is you find the typical sample, you try to control as many factors, so you want the same gender, the same color, the same age, you know, and but I think that touches on something that we've spoken about a lot together, Larry, is the data deficit within disability inclusion, within accessibility as well. There's a lot of us, a lot of people that are here today working in accessibility or caring about it or wanting to bring it into your organization, and you say we have to care about the people that need it most. Often the managers, the C-suite executives don't know that the potential customers, the client base have these disabilities, and they don't know that they have to think about it really, you know, and that's where there's companies like Fable who help with bringing in people with disabilities into user testing, you know, and I think that the more we bring people into the conversation and the more we engage them in the companies and how you're building is going to raise their voices, raise the consciousness, and also try to get better processes within the organizations as well. And so there's a few things coming up there from people, but some questions. But one thing we've touched a little, mostly maybe on some of the things that we worry about or we're you know, fearful of. But what companies or what developments, any companies, new startups, or you've mentioned Be My Eyes, Larry. Maybe not everybody here knows what Be My Eyes are or what they do. So if you can explain that a little bit. And then what other companies are exciting at the moment that you think this organization is doing something that can have a tangible, positive outcome on somebody's life that has a disability?
Yeah, and I like the idea of tangible advances. Be My Eyes is using AI to recognize images, particularly for people who are blind, so they could read the prescription on their prescription bottle, read product information, look at their environment, and have everything described in detail and in my testing, pretty accurate too. But then even going beyond that, you can point your phone at your refrigerator. You want to know what you might need to go shopping. It'll identify everything in your refrigerator, speak it out to you, and then even tell you recipes of things you could make for what's in your refrigerator. That's a pretty nice advancement. And imagine the other kinds of advances you could make if you could recognize what's going on around you and then compute some wayfinding, some friends. I'm terrible with remembering people's names. How great to go into a crowd, scan it, and it tells me, oh yeah, that's Joe. You remember you met him 2 years ago. Oh yeah. So there's so many great practical applications. The one, because we keep coming back to captioning and automatic speech recognition, is finally, after so many years, the major tech companies are banding together to gather more samples of people with non-standard speech. Google's end of that is Project Euphonia, but at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, they are gathering all the big tech companies and gathering finally some, it's known as dysarthric speech, heavily accented speech, deaf speech, and feeding those into the engine so we don't keep having these kinds of errors, and therefore improving the outcomes of automatic speech recognition. So I'm encouraged. Maybe it's a little late to the game. We will see the same thing coming soon on sign language, which I'm working on in one of my startups. And the company's called Sign Up Media, and only human interpreters used to interpret entertainment. But everyone keeps asking us, what about AI? What about signing avatars? It's just not ready of the quality that deaf people insist on. It will hit the market before it's ready, but there is a great research effort going on today. There's a coalition called AI by AI, that's automatic interpreting by artificial intelligence. And they're part of the Ethical AI and Fair AI group. And they're going to try to put forward principles that say, these are the things you need to conquer if you're going to try to use AI to either recognize sign language, any of the hundreds that exist, and create sign language. So these projects are taking a look at, and hopefully will affect these early releases of AI applications. They're just not ready yet.
Yes, and just to say, I'll come to you now, Matthew, just to say that any of the resources, tools, companies that are mentioned, I will follow up with links and things for all of those afterwards. So go ahead, Matthew.
Just want to add what Larry say about new to testing. I think that it could be a big area, because very often I get requests from clients say, we need people with disability who are I don't know, who are deaf or blind or visual impairment, hearing impairment, or neurodiverse, so on, or different disability. Did anybody had that disability? Can you help us? And I get very annoyed with that, because especially we are a consultancy company and we get paid for our expertise. So I believe people with disabilities should be paid as well. Because, you know, for example, people are asking me, can you help and test their caption? And I said, well, yeah, I live and breathe with caption, but that's my expertise, and you know. But with AI, I think if we can start thinking about making the data very inclusive, because, for example, when I go to ChatGPT or Gemini, and I ask, can you give me a description about neurodiversity talk? Give me a description how to make the environment more inclusive. What are the key points I need to consider? You'd be surprised what the answer is. It's quite good. It's really helpful, and you could do that with all different disabilities. So if you think about it, if you could capture that data, you can put that into testing. By the way, I look in the chat, I read all this chat, so thank you very much for that. And somebody mentioned there was a company called Novability. We've done that, working on that. And that would be fantastic, because that will make our data more inclusive. It will make our, you know, we won't have an issue. People, when they want to test their product, make it more inclusive, they won't have an issue say, I couldn't find the right people to test my product. So again, that's the benefit of using AI to help us. One thing I want to mention is that I gave a talk to Princeton University, and they were talking about developing an AI to describe art, a painting, for visual impairment, but I thought that would be great. The problem is art is very subjective to the individual. So, for example, I said, if Mona Lisa is smiling, some people think she is, some people think she's not. But if you ask AI, ChatGPT, give me a description of Mona Lisa, it actually say she's smiling. So again, it's not perfect. It's something that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely. Perceptions and subjectivity and context all are things that AI has limitations, or they're so individual. Sherry?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So one of the reasons why sign language interpretation is not ready for prime time yet is that it is really context sensitive. So where your signs are placed matters. What expression is on your face matters. How emphatically you are signing something matters. In the US, there's two different ways to sign the phrase Black Lives Matter. Okay, one is considered inclusive, one is considered very literal, where you're just signing the three words together, or maybe even doing BLM, which is the acronym for Black Lives Matter. Okay, context is where AI is not there yet. Here is my concern. My concern is sustainability. We've already got issues with how much energy the existing neural networks are using. I mean, it's the amount of a small country. And how is that energy being generated? Is it being generated through solar? Is it being generated through coal? That could end up triggering pollution problems, and then that ties into this whole climate change scenario that we're currently facing. So again, ethics and context. I think that the next level of evolution that needs to happen for context needs to happen with some of these sustainability and ethics things in mind. Do I actually believe it's going to happen that way? Honestly, probably not, because as Larry said, right now it's all about money. And the one company plug that I want to give, let me go back here a second. I'm a startup, right? Do I have money to go out and license things? Probably not, especially if you're a nonprofit. So access isn't just about can I use it? Does it work with my keyboard? Access is also about economical access. So my thing is about open source large language models, and the company that is doing, I think, the best job of that right now is called Hugging Face. So it's Hugging Face, the two words put together, .co, not .com. If you go to .com, you get icons about hugging faces. But that would, I think open source is going to be a huge part of, not just can the oil companies of the world use AI, but can everybody use AI?
Definitely. Larry, I know you want to chime in there.
Sure. We're talking about companies that are really in the thick of this. And as you know, Neve, the company Scribely, Scribely, that's with a B, Scribe. It was established to solve one of the biggest problems on image appearance and accessibility on the web, and missing alt text, which has been pervasive for many years. So the founder, Caroline Desrosiers, put together a company with humans writing alt text. Now, there's a lot of images out there on websites and in applications. So within a very short time, she was confronted with, what about AI? And now there is a lot of AI adding alt text for images, and context is missing most of the time. And it might get it occasionally right. But what Caroline is looking at now is making sure that there are humans in the loop. And I think humans in the loop is a very important part of AI, to make sure that the content is vetted, corrected, and advanced. So the next time you look at this picture, it is in the right context. And if you have to put more humans onto the job than you originally thought you needed to because your machines would take care of it, you're going to get much higher quality if you make sure you rely on the organic intelligence that humans still bring to the mix.
I think that's a really, really key point there, is the humans in the loop, and everybody is kind of saying, yes, of course, agree. That does go against what companies are trying to do at the moment. I even saw that Klarna, very large buy now, pay later organization, saying that the AI agents can do the work of 700 people. You know, and a lot of organizations just even want content just to be created by AI. I wish I had a screenshot. I don't, but I saw yesterday somebody was given a talk at a marketing conference, and they're already finding on Amazon that people aren't reviewing the product descriptions and the product names, and the name of the product that somebody published to Amazon was, I'm sorry, that doesn't cover our copyright with OpenAI. So absolute nonsense, but people are just, again, trusting, not reviewing anything, and taking that human out of the loop in any of these things is going, we all need to have an extra or critical thinking cap on, you know, and one thing with Scribely and the captions, it's about that meaningfulness, and sometimes what we're communicating, the beauty of what we're communicating is between the words, between the sentences, not the words themselves. Sherry?
Yeah, so funny you should mention Klarna. There's already been a case with Air Canada where their chatbot misinterpreted an Air Canada rule about refunds and told the customers one thing when the Air Canada written policy was something else, and Air Canada was held liable for upholding what the chatbot said. And shocker, their chatbot came down the next day. So I think any company that thinks that they can do AI without a human involved right now is not going to financially benefit from that choice in the end. I think where AI can come into play, you know, we also hear the same thing, and I'm sure Larry and Matthew have heard this about, oh, well, if I have my AI write my shopping cart test plan, then I don't need that accessibility engineer anymore. Well, you know, take the mundane templated stuff, have AI do it, have a human review it, and then take your accessibility resources and put them on things that do require a human. Don't use it to slash your accessibility team in half, because the word that we use to call companies that slash their accessibility teams foolishly is defendants. Meaning that they get litigated against in the US and end up having to pay millions of dollars in legal fees and you know, just, you know, settlements and retooling and having to refocus their engineering only on engineering. So there's, I mean, only on accessibility. So there's opportunity cost there as well. But anybody who thinks that they can make that leap with AI in its current state is going to pay for that decision.
Absolutely. Matthew, we'll go to you for.
Yeah, I'm going to be very quick, conscious of time, and maybe the audience want to ask a couple of questions. But one thing I want to really emphasize is that one thing AI does not have is empathy, and that's where the human needs to be there. And it might be in the future, but right now it does not have that empathy, and that empathy is really important in many of the circuits that we have.
I do know of an Irish company that are trying to put the EI, the emotional intelligence, into the AI. But again, that can be things like this can be misconstrued with how we're communicating. That's what we look at, like in my company in Tigum, and we look at how are you interacting with people. Empathy in one culture and in one organization, in one part of the world might feel or sound different. It's very hard to get those things. But we're going on the communication piece as well, and going back to some of the things we said about bias, you know, it's very obvious what companies are using the chatbots for, the customer care team, the customer service. And I was pretty, you know, horrified the other day that the greeting that I got from the call agent, they said, "Hello, Niamh," obviously recognized this as an Irish name. And the first greeting was top of the morning to you, top of, you know, which is not something we say, but it would class as something very stereotypical and biased, towards Irish people. And that painted a bad perception for me of that organization as well. And so companies maybe don't even realize it doesn't have to go as far as litigation with AI and talking to people, but they don't realize that all these little things, cost saving measures, are actually maybe turning customers away. And that's not even about disabilities. That's just about how should you just speak to people normally. Larry?
Well, one of the great benefits of AI and ChatGPT in particular was it helped me find Tigum. And I was looking around for companies that can shape language according to the audience and the reception. So, hey, how about telling us about Tigum as a great solution for some of the things you're doing?
Yeah, well, that's one thing, and we're going to finish. We do have a lot of questions. A lot of have been touched on, and we're going to follow up with as well. But one thing a lot of people hear with accessibility, one part of the WCAG guidelines compliance, content needs to be understandable, and we touched on subjectivity. How can you make sure that something is understandable for different people? It's really, really hard, and that's why there's no system of measurement for that. And that's really one area that we're trying to measure. And so at the moment we're building just a website checker, a website analyst tool, so you'd be able to upload your website and just get feedback. Is this going to be difficult for people to understand? Is this going to, potentially turn away customers? And then we can use the AI to help us reform information, but always with the human in the loop. Never publish anything before it's been checked. Make sure that it's reviewed for all of those things. And yeah, Sherry, we'll go to you, and then, conscious of time, we'll wrap it up in a couple of moments.
Yeah, so people who only are just getting started in their AI journey may not realize that there are public AIs and private AIs. And so that comment that you just made triggered that thought in me that when you go to ChatGPT and you say, check this code or generate this code, that code then becomes part of ChatGPT's learning. So especially if you're putting code into ChatGPT, if your code is proprietary, if your code is protected by trade secret law, you just gave up your rights to that code. Okay, so under no circumstances should a public AI ever be used to handle something proprietary, like a contract or code, because then that information becomes part of the next ChatGPT answer. Private AI, on the other hand, is something where you can control who has access to it. And so, but that's obviously, much more expensive and much more difficult to access. So, just putting that out there so that people can add to their knowledge about AIs when making decisions about how they're going to use it.
I think there's a lot of decisions on this. I mean, this is probably something that we can come back to and have this conversation multiple times, because I think that we've touched on the surface. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists and also attendees today, and I will be sending out the recording, as well as I have a bunch of resources, company links and things to send out as well. But if you're interested, then at this time next Thursday, we will be speaking about digital accessibility, and also, yes, we'll be speaking about digital accessibility and EU Act, how to get started and make sure that your websites, your journeys are accessible for people, on the internet, which is really important as well. So again, thank you for everybody. And if there are still questions, perhaps we will be able to follow up with those and resources with the recording. So yeah, thank you so much to the guests. I think you all have so much to say, so much interesting things, insightful things to say. So I'm really grateful for your time, and I'm really grateful for the over 200 people that joined us live here today. So I will share that recording with everyone. So I hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye, everyone.
everyone. Have a good day. Bye.